Word on the street is that the black community is suffering from a lot of problems, from high crime to a huge wealth gap to poverty to poor educational achievements to unemployment. With all these problems, what's to blame? Is it black on black crime? Is it white supremacy? Is it the culture? Let's talk. Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. Different sides of the aisle will have will claim that there are different things that are responsible for the problems the black community is facing. Of course, like anything, there's usually a mixture. But I think if we can look at and identify just like the single greatest issue, we can begin to move forward. And I say that already having in mind and knowing what that single issue is. But before we get to that, let's take a look at these other things that people are talking about. The culture. People are claiming that black culture is horrible, it's broken, it glorifies sex and drugs, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Are you talking about black culture or American culture? Because I could turn to any channel and see glorification of sex, drugs, of any number of things, any number of behaviors that is being accused or the finger is being pointed at the black community. I can see being displayed and promoted in American culture. Nothing about that is exclusive to black people or to black culture, and nothing of that is indicative of all of black people. Black on black crime. Once again, we take a look at the numbers and find that people commit crime against people who are in close proximity to them, and that's often, especially in America, correlates to racial groups. So you have a lot of black on black crime. You have a lot of white on white crime. The interesting thing is, most people out there won't ever use the phrase white on white crime. That should tell you something. But is it white supremacy? Those on the left feel that, yes, it's the white, racist white system keeping black people down. And, that's why you have to vote for Democrats, so that you can have people in power who aren't racist. If you look at all of the, not even solutions, because they're not proposing solutions. They're actually trying to identify or claiming to identify a problem that coincides with them promoting their agenda as if it's a solution. And that's where we start to get at the true problem. That's when we start to identify what the actual problem facing the black community is. And it took me until this year to fully grasp and identify it. In fact, I identified it during the Democratic primary. During the Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders was leading in the race, and then something happened in North Carolina. Joe Biden, who at this point wasn't a factor, got support from Jim Clyburn. And Jim Clyburn went hard for him, said, hey, this is the guy, this is who we've got to vote for. And sure enough, South Carolinians came out in numbers and gave the state of South Carolina to Joe Biden. Also, Bloomberg jumps into the race and Bobby Rush jumps out and endorses him. Now, mind you, Joe Biden is the same individual who was the author of the VCC-LEA, the Violent Crime Control Law Enforcement Act, also known as the Crime Bill of 1994. Michael Bloomberg was the implementer and overseer of increase of the use of stop and frisk in New York City. And yet, two black men, two black politicians, two prominent black leaders jumped up and supported these men. That's when it dawned on me what the problem facing the black community is. See, you can look and say it's somebody like Joe Biden using the system and enacting policies and pushing policies that are harmful to the black community. And you're not wrong. You can look at somebody like Bloomberg, who's telling cops to just stop black and Hispanic people and say, hey, those are the ones who are committing crimes. But you're not fully getting to the root of the problem if you stop looking there. Because how did they get these things done? They couldn't have done it. And if you ask Joe Biden had no problem throwing the people under the bus that facilitated his actions and his war on the black community. Black leaders. Every time Joe Biden was criticized, Joe Biden said, well, the black leaders supported it. He would talk about black church leaders, black politicians, the Congressional Black Caucus. And if you do the research, you realize he's not lying about that. They supported it. They advocated for it. And they delivered young black men on a platter to these politicians who then wreaked havoc on the black community. The problem is, and has been for quite some time, black leadership. Our black leaders are not actually making decisions in the best interest of the black community. So what decisions are they making? What are they basing these decisions on? They are not actually, and when you realize what's going on, you realize that they're not actually black leaders. They're employees. They're agents. They're operatives. They are working for people. They are working for organizations that have separate and distinct agendas. And quite frankly, those organizations will have agendas that are completely opposite and mean bad things for the black community. But these are who they are working for. And they will do whatever they must do to help these organizations, these institutions succeed. That is their primary goal. So in the case of people like James Clyburn and Bobby Rush, and people will get mad at this, oh, they have histories of fighting for the people, and then things changed. Remember, and this is why during Black History Month, I always say, don't deify people. Because people will fall short. And what you have here is people who've been co-opted. People who are now working for the interest of an organization, of a corporation, because that's what the Democratic Party is. It's a corporation. They're working for the interest of that corporation and against the interest of the black community. How can you support? Let's go back to the 94 crime bill. Let's go before the 94 crime bill. Let's talk about the 86 and 88 anti-drug abuse acts. In fact, I think it was the 84, 84, 86, and 88. There was laws that were passed and advocated for by Joe Biden that did immeasurable damage to the black community, including the crack law, the 100-to-1 ratio. And you had black leaders who delivered the black community to the Democrats on the platter. Say, hey, do whatever you want to them. They did not stand up and fight. And the perfect example is there was a tweet by, I think it was Talbot Swan, Bishop Talbot Swan, and he talked about how the difference in response for the opioid crisis and the crack epidemic. And then I pointed out, yes, because white politicians aren't trying to throw white young kids under the bus. These white politicians aren't just sacrificing their white children to the government. Our black leaders did. Our black leaders said, okay, we can't control them. You do whatever you want to. Which shows, number one, a lack of leadership. If you couldn't do what you were supposed to do, you need to get out the way. If you couldn't do what you're doing to help and give these kids direction, give these young people direction, then you're not leading the kids. You're not leading the community. And that what they wanted was position for themselves, comfort for themselves, and that's what they fought for. So that's why they followed orders, followed marching orders, regardless of the effect it would have on the community. That's what these black leaders have done and are doing. And it's not just the Democrats. And because we can look at people like Candace Owens and see that she's a shill. Perfect case in point, Candace Owens, big Trump supporter. When did she ever advocate for a black agenda? She didn't. She would give the talking points about stopping abortions and black fathers and family getting rid of welfare, but she never had a black agenda. Trump had to go outside of the Republican Party to get somebody who could start crafting a black agenda. The Platinum Plan didn't come from Candace Owens. Why not? Why didn't any of these black Republicans have a Platinum Plan in place for the black community? Because they were not working on providing an agenda from the black community to the Republican Party. They were providing a Republican agenda from the Republican Party to the black community. But they weren't even making inroads in significant numbers because their ambassadors didn't even have a liking for black people and demonstrated clear hostility to black people and black communities. Whereas the Democratic operatives appear to actually care about black people and like black people, but when you see what they're doing, you realize, no, they don't care about black people. They care about themselves. They care about their black political class, protecting their power, their positions. That's what they care about. So that is why they are doing what is in their interest, not what is in the community's interest. Because when the war on drugs hit, why didn't they go to the communities and say, hey, let's figure something out? When people like Joe Biden started talking about, I don't care how tough their lives are, we got to get them off the streets. Why didn't they put their foot down and say, hey, hold up. You're talking about our people, Al. You better slow your roll and watch your step. Because they were never fighting. Well, at that point, they had stopped fighting for the black community, assuming they ever were. At that point, they were not fighting for the black community. At that point, they were fighting for the Democratic Party, and they were fighting for their positions within the Democratic Party. They were operatives. They were not black leaders. But there's so many things you can look at and realize how bad they were and how bad and why that are evidences of how ineffective as leaders they were and where their true allegiance is. So just start with schooling. The public educational system has completely and totally failed our children. But it shouldn't be a surprise. Because why on earth would you take a system that has demonstrated hostility, hatred, and contempt for black people since its inception? Why would you take that system, give it money, resources, and then also give it custody and control of your children for 13 years of their lives? Why would you do that? You weren't thinking about the kids. You couldn't have been thinking about the kids. You were thinking about you. Because that makes no sense, to give your enemy custody and control over your children and to pretend that you are somehow a black leader, that you are somehow concerned with the plight and success of black people. That's a lie. And your actions make it clear that that's a lie, and that was not your concern. The ease in which you sacrificed young black boys to this criminal justice system, to this corrupt criminal justice system, in a failed war on drugs, shows that the success of the black community was never your top priority. Wasn't your priority. You had to keep up appearances, but that was never your priority, and it shows. Because if you just take a look at it, take a look at those two things, the schooling, the education, and the criminal justice, the criminal injustices that face the black community. Why were these kids out there selling drugs? Because they saw how ineffectual and how useless the educational system that they were being subjected to, not being gifted with, being subjected to, This educational system was not intended to help them succeed. This educational system was meant to keep them in line, was meant to train them for menial labor and to create a docile workforce. That's what it was intended for. And these young men said, nah, we ain't with that. And they decided to make money through other means. And had you cared, had you been paying attention, you would have said, you know what? I get why they're doing this. If I want them to stop doing it, if I think their behavior is actually destructive, then I've got to give them a better alternative, and you never gave them a better alternative. You gave them, on one side, subjugation, or doing their own thing. That's what you offered them. You offered them subjugation and subjugation and subservience to a sorry system, and they didn't want it. So as I look at this, and I look at the current state of the black community, I see what's necessary. You need leaders who are actually willing to fight for the black community. You need leaders who actually care about the younger generations coming up, and who are actually going to fight to give them options for success, not just a lifetime of servitude for minimum wage, for chump change. Because even right now, people talk, oh yes, we need to raise the minimum wage because, you know, black people are, okay, so why are so many black people on minimum wage? Why are so many black people at the very bottom of the totem pole? Because they've been failed by their leaders. We've been failed by our leaders. And we need to do something about it. We need to get rid of these people who aren't actually leaders, but who are being selected by our enemies. We need to get rid of the people who have been selected by organizations and institutions that do not have our interests at heart, and oftentimes are actually hostile to us. Being able to understand this is why I personally am working on a plan that will be unveiled soon. Because the leaders that exist right now are trash. So when Ice Cube comes out with the contract for Black America, people say, oh, he's just a rapper. Leave it to the experts. Well, why didn't the experts come out with the contract for Black America? Why did it take a rapper to do this? Because you clowns aren't doing your jobs. You clowns don't give a damn about the black community. You care about your own selves. You care about your own wealth, your own success, your own positions in these companies, organizations, and institutions. That's what you're fighting for. You're fighting for spots. You're just fighting for yourselves. And you don't want to, and you won't dare go afoul of your bosses and your masters. That's why when Ice Cube came out, y'all got scared. Because y'all was like, no, he's gonna upset the bosses. He's gonna upset the powers that be. We got to keep him in line. We can't let the game be exposed. But the fact that Ice Cube did it shows that leadership is not going to come from where we think it's going to come. These people who are experts, who know policy, but ain't doing a damn thing about it, who are so willing, who at a drop of a dime will sacrifice millions of young black men to a corrupt criminal justice system, and then afterwards say, oops, unintended consequences. That's what I realize is the reason why a change is coming. Change has already begun. And I'm just glad that I have the opportunity to be a part of it. But when these so-called leaders see what's happening, they will fight tooth and nail to try to stop us. But we'll be ready. As always, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, give me a like, share, subscribe, also comment. And if you don't like what I said, if you think, oh, how dare you talk about black leaders who've done so much for us, let me know where I'm wrong. Put it in the comment section. Don't give me a thumbs down. Cool. I'm cool with that. but put it in the comment section. Let me address it either in comments or in a future video. Thanks for checking this out. I'll see you next time.